camcorders, film cameras, and even cell phones that shoot video, everyone can make movies. Filmmaking is the new garage band. This is Framelines, the show about people making movies right here in Ohio.
Framelines is brought to you in part by Backyard HD, Tape Central, Production Partners Media, and grants from the Greater Columbus Arts Council.
Bill Johns from Cleveland is the featured filmmaker. Let's see what he's been up to.
Okay, you, take that, pack it up, go pack up the instruments. Go! No. They pushed the line back. I have an ambulance coming for you. You just sit tight. You know what I mean.
Where's Anna?
Anna!
The ambulance is here. We're gonna get you moved to a field hospital.
Will you be going with me?
No, I can't. But you'll get better care there, okay?
Anna,
Guys, come on.
I wish we had more time.
When I was a kid, my family used to go on vacations and different things, and my dad bought a Brownie 8mm movie camera, a wind-up, little box. And I was just intrigued by that little camera. And of course, a kid in the 60s, you're like watching a lot of TV, and combat was probably my favorite show. And so I always wanted to get into that and to be somehow involved in movies. And from that time on, I actually made a couple of little short films with that Brownie movie camera. And by the time I was in high school, I had actually, with my paper route money, been able to afford a Super 8 Nizo, which was, a really nice looking camera and had real high quality, and started doing short films even as early as high school. And that was a long time ago. Well, one of the things that I did is a company or a guy came to me and asked me if I would be interested in making a rock climbing movie down in Seneca, West Virginia. And I was like, yeah, sure. So we went down there and we did it in Super 8 sound. And it turned out really well. There were moments when you would think for sure that I was right next to them on the mountain, climbing the cliffs and all that. But they were all just areas that I had seen. Well, that rock looks a little like that real high spire. I'll put you guys there, film all my close-ups and stuff of you belaying and doing all the different things, and we'll cut that in with the wide shots that we had gotten. We even, my brother even came down, and he was a pilot, and we actually flew around the spire and got these amazing aerial shots too. So yeah, I was very proud of that, and that turned out really nice. Really enjoyed that. The first feature film that I worked on, I was director of photography for a film called Enemy, and it was done locally by a couple of guys down in Parma, and we actually sold that film to Blockbuster and Hollywood Video. So it got a pretty large distribution. Somebody made probably $250,000 to $300,000 on a $15,000 film, because it was shot in 16mm, it was all film. And so that was the main cost, was the film, the processing, and the transfer. I worked on that, and they said that the film looked like we had spent $250,000 on it. So I was pleased with that I gave it the look and feel of a bigger picture. And I enjoyed that. That was the first film that feature film that I'd worked on. And since then, I've done 6 more feature films for small companies, in the area. And one of those is one that I wrote and produced and directed. And as far as I know, I think that's the only other film in that batch that has actually gotten distribution. I think the future of Cleveland filmmaking is going to depend on the city and investors and people that are in the area that have the funds or the wherewithal, who can finally see a project and see that it has potential and that it has marketability, and are willing to take a step of faith and put it in the hands of someone who can make it happen. That, of course, I'd love to be me. But it is tough. It's really tough. The investors in the area, they don't know anything about film marketing or film, period. And so to get them to loosen up their pockets, and give you some money is really difficult. You really have to have a body of work behind you that will convince them. And that's what I've been working on. The films that I've been working on, like I say, I try to make them look like we spent a lot more than we did to get the highest value out of the dollar that's spent. And then in marketing, to make sure that it's marketed in such a way that we actually make a profit on it. I did a film, my own feature film, which I wrote, produced, and directed. I produced that and made it for under $10,000 and just signed a deal with a distributor where the cash advance will be $20,000. So in a way, right out of the gate on that film, I've doubled the investor's money. So that always looks good, and it always makes it more interesting for him to want to get more involved and to want to, put up a little more next time and that kind of thing. Because one of the things that I want to do and try to get is I want to get a recognizable actor. It's so important to distribution that you have someone on the video jacket or in the poster that people recognize and that have a draw. There's actually formulas as to how much money a person will draw just by their face. So I want to try and get one of those faces in there that will draw some money so that I can then get the money to make the film. We're making the effort, we're trying. We're trying to make movies that are interesting and things that are, they always have to be low budget, but for my own part, I've always tried to take and make silk purses out of sow's ears. I mean, give me any money and I can do a lot with it. But it's been a challenge, but we keep forging ahead. You got to learn by doing sometimes.
Actor Richard Hatch starred in such TV shows as The Streets of San Francisco and both versions of Battlestar Galactica. He recently came to Cincinnati to teach an acting seminar.
I'd always loved mentoring people, coaching people. Always was something that I had a proclivity for. And so, I've ended up basically getting invited around the country. I just got invited to come here to Ohio to do a one-day workshop. Normally I do two because I like to have more time to work with the students. I'm not one of those guys that teaches a superficial approach to acting. Mine's a much deeper, more complex, more, provocative approach to acting, which for me is, I don't care how you get to the truth of the scene, you've got to find a way to get there. And I help each actor find those techniques, find those processes that will lead them to connecting the material in a more powerful way. And also the way I teach life skills. I mean, really, acting is a metaphor for life. So I really teach people communication. I teach them to deal with the fears and insecurities that stop people from doing everything that they want to do in life. And people don't realize that there's a way through all that. They somehow think that the people that are successful in movies don't have any fear. Not true. Actors learn how to deal with it. I mean, listen, we're always facing rejection every 5 seconds. Most people have 8 to 5 jobs and they work one job for many, many years. Most people. Actors are out of a job every 5 minutes, no matter how good they are. And they're always having to go up against hundreds of other actors, thousands of other actors to get the next job. They're always dealing with rejection, always dealing with fear, always dealing with insecurity. So if you survive long enough in this business, you learn some things about life, and you gain some wisdom, and I think you learn how to take it in stride. Scenes are never about what the words say. So often you never talk about what's really going on in the scene or what you're really feeling. A scene could be about characters talking about bowling, or cooking, and yet it's a love scene. It's a seduction scene. Or it could be a scene where one character is breaking up with the other, and yet the dialogue doesn't lead in that direction. The important part of the scene is the subtext. The subtext is the tree trunk of the scene. That's what this scene's really about. In movies, how often do we ever really say what we want to say? And the movie is all about characters miscommunicating, fighting, arguing, challenging each other, whether it's comedic or whether it's serial comedic or dramatic. Characters are all about miscommunicating until finally they've been banging each other's heads and they get to that one scene where they get into it, and finally, after all of the stuff is done, they finally get to that moment where they can say, okay, I love you, you know. They couldn't say that the whole movie, but they finally get to that moment of truth where they say what they feel, right? Well, in life, as in movies, you know, we rarely say what we really feel. We really cop or embrace what we really feel. So again, actors have to not look at the logic of the scene. They have to really intuit into what's really going on between these two characters. What's the scene really about? And then make choices. Choices are what you choose to believe is true, okay? About the character, about the circumstance, about where you are, about what's going on, about who you are, what my relationship is to you, where I came from, where I'm going after this scene. These are all choices that I have to make, that I have to find a way to connect to as if they were true. There's the art of the actor, is some people have great imaginations, and just by imagining those choices as being true, it affects them on an organic level. But most people's imaginations are not very well developed. Most people, if they said, okay, it's sub-zero right now in the room, they go, okay, you know, nothing changes. Or they act like it's cold. They can't really make a choice. What if it was 10 degrees below zero? Our body has a memory of everything. We've all been in the cold, we've been in freezers, we've been here, we've done this, we've done that. We got a collective memory of a lot of things, and it's like a hard drive that you access memories from. And just by letting your imagination move into a what if this was true? What if this premise was true? What if it was 10 degrees below zero? What if this was my girlfriend, the love of my life, and she's leaving on the train in 5 minutes and I'm never gonna see her again? How do I feel about that? And connecting to that. Again, it's building up that ability to use your imagination. It's also building up the ability to pull down the walls and that keep most people from dealing with their emotions and feelings. I mean, most people usually don't want to feel what they feel, right? Actors have to be more accessible to letting material affect them on a deeper level. So you gotta allow yourself to be more vulnerable. It doesn't mean you gotta be crying and falling apart, but it just means, listen, how many people go into a movie theater, the lights come down, and they've never cried in their life, and they're bawling in the movie because no one's around and no one's watching it, and they give themselves a moment to feel, right? That's why people go to movies. You're feeling all these emotions, you're identifying with the character. Well, that's what an actor does, but on purpose, you see? Learning how to do that is the art of the actor.
Next up, Peter John Ross shows us some basic movie making techniques.
One of the first things we need to cover in making any movie is orienting the viewer. The first rule we can look at is the 180-degree rule. Once you establish a scene and show where people are, you've also established the 180-degree rule. From this master shot, we've established that the woman is on the right and the man is on the left. That means that whenever we show them, he should be on the left and she should be on the right side. From the overhead, we can show that as soon as we place them for the camera, the placement of the camera can only go anywhere on this side of the line, meaning 180 degrees on this line. We can aim the camera in any direction, but it must be on this side of the line. Now, even though from overhead we can clearly see where the actors are, it's not as clear from what the camera sees. If we break the 180-degree rule and place one camera here and the other camera over here, the camera view shows the actors facing the same direction. Even when the angles are not as blatantly off, it can be disorienting because the actors' eye lines won't match. Now, you can cross the 180-degree line, but you have to show the camera move, like so. Not only do you have to shoot this movement of crossing the line, but you also have to use it in the edit. That way you orient the viewer. Once you're on the other side of the line, you have to stay on it, unless you move the camera back to the other side. Remember, the camera is the viewer in the scene. They're a non-active participant in everything that's going on. They only see what you show them.
Derek Rimmelspa is shooting his horror film all over Ohio, and Framelines is taking a look behind the scenes at Eternal.
I've come to apologize. I feel in part responsible for your son's death. I mean, it happened right outside my house, even if he was trying to steal from me.
You and I both know that's not what happened.
It was an accident. I didn't plan for it to happen like that. I apologize.
Apologize? For killing my son, or for lying about it? You did what you needed to keep your life the way you wanted. And now you think killing my son is the reason for your unhappiness. Well, apologizing is not going to make your wife love you. And it is not going to bring my son back.
Eternal is a story of a flawed man who is cursed to live forever with the sins of his past. It's a horror movie that takes place a little bit in the 1800s, but mostly in present day, and kind of jumps between the two time frames. A big challenge we had was finding the locations for some of the 1800s stuff, because there's, number one, a lot of those are way protected, and people that have this nice pristine cabin from the 1800s doesn't want a big film crew coming in and possibly, damaging it. And, a lot of times, like, if you need something 1800s, it has to sound 1800s too. So you can't have a cabin right by a highway. You can't, have it right under literally we found this great historical village that was less than half a mile away from an airport. So, there was no way we could shoot there unless we were just shooting silent. And sound is just such a big part of movies. And I think one of lower budget movies where they run into a lot of problems is sometimes they don't pay enough attention to sound. And as far as professional end of movies, like watching the finished product, a lot of times people will forgive a little bit if an image isn't super perfect and super pristine. A lot of times they'll forgive the image a little bit, but bad audio, audiences really notice and just, I don't think, appreciate. We shot at all practical locations. Obviously, we did some set design on stuff, but we didn't actually build any sets or do any in-studio stuff. The 1800 stuff we shot in Nelsonville, and we went all over Ohio. Meredith Pegger, producer, just looked at every historical society and all sorts of stuff and tried to find all these old buildings. And we went through several thought processes. We were like, well, do we want to build an old cabin set? Do we want to find one? And there are kind of pluses and minuses for both of them. Obviously, it's a lot of work to build a set. You need to build it. You need a place to shoot it. And lots of stuff. And a lot of times sets just feel like sets. There are a lot of great practical locations that were old cabins, but the problem with that is a lot of them are really small and you don't have a lot of room to light. You don't have a lot of room to put cameras and, just do moves and stuff. But we ended up finding a spot that wasn't too far away from Columbus that we could shoot at, that was big enough that we could actually light through the windows and we can move the camera around and just worked perfect. People around Columbus have really embraced us, and really a lot of people that own restaurants, who own clubs, who just houses, just have been really great with us and let us shoot at most of their places for free, and just have been really super supportive, and we've gotten a lot of community support for the movie. There were a couple roles I really wanted to get a name actor for. PJ Souls, who was in the original John Carpenter and Halloween, Stripes, and had a small scene in Devil's Rejects, the Rob Zombie movie, was always one of my favorite actresses, and Halloween's one of my favorite movies. And we approached her about a role in it, and she was very receptive and liked the script, and we stopped looking after she signed on, so it was perfect. Working with her is fantastic. She actually is very bubbly and has a great, warm personality, very easy to work with, took direction well, and PJ is just a fantastic person to work with on every level. Professionally, what she did acting-wise, just easy to work with, did a fantastic job. For Eternal, Alex Esper was our director of photography. I had worked with him on several previous movies. I AD'd that he shot on Frat House Massacre and a couple other movies, and we had a long working relationship. And I brought up the idea of Eternal, and I wasn't sure if he'd be interested in shooting it or not. And he said, yeah, definitely, count me in. I definitely want to shoot your movie. So we had him, and that just sort of upped the level for the whole rest of the crew, because we had a really good DP, but to make the movie good, you really need a good lighting crew, and you need a good art crew. And so since we had such a high caliber director of photography, we really had to make sure we got good crew members all around, and I think we really did that. We thought the HD cameras have came along enough that you get a really good image and you can just shoot and do tons of takes and go fast and keep going, so we went the HD route. In Eternal, we had some gore effects. We had a lot of blood, we had some stabbing, we had some baseball bat hitting, we had slashing, and a lot of different gunshots, and just a kind of a variety of blood and gore and special effects that was both fun to do but also a challenge. And when you're on set, a lot of times you'll get the actor all sticky and bloody and you have to do takes 30 times and they're way uncomfortable, and it slows you down a little bit, but it was a lot of fun to do. I think Eternal, mostly shooting went pretty well. There was definitely tons of challenges. I feel like we had a great crew and we overcame any obstacle and came away with a really great movie.
Peter John Ross talks to writers and cast from the web series 8 and 5.
Shut down that train now. I repeat, shut down that train now.
Already on it. Be there in 5.
Aiden, disengage now! We've got civilians on that train! There's officers at the next station!
Train's approaching the station. Stop going down. Let's go.
He shut off the controls. I'm moving in for another pass.
How did you become involved in the original 8 and 5?
I had worked a few years before that with Tim Baldwin on a project. But so he calls me up and says, hey, we're going to do this 48-hour film festival.
So how did you get the call for the 48-hour film?
Johnny, I grew up with John Jackson, and we had collaborated back from the 80s. And so he called me and said, hey, dude, I'm going to do this thing. And I was like, yeah, that'd be awesome. And so he called and said, well, you're going to do it with me, right? And I was like, well, I got to shoot next week. I don't want to spend all weekend in a studio somewhere. He's like, well, you got to do it. You got to show up because you're my lead.
Talking about shooting on green screen, I mean, how challenging was that for you as an actor? I mean, did you find it to be more like, since you've got a theater background, did you find it to be more like theater acting and that it's all in your head?
I think I expected that, but it was totally different. I mean, I'd worked on the green screen with some commercials and industrials that I had done, but never to this extent. I mean, we were there hours and how many hours were we on the green screen?
All of your sets were green then.
Yes. And actually, one of the challenging things that I hadn't anticipated is that you don't realize as an actor how much you rely on your surroundings until they're not there. It's like you want to, lean on a door frame, or you want to know if you're in, a rusted out, building, or if you're in a beautiful marble hallway, and you don't know.
So how did you get involved with 8 and 5?
Well, Johnny originally asked me to be part of the 48-hour project, and I instead went on vacation. And then, so when this thing had its great success, I felt like a total chump. And then these guys got involved. They started to develop the series. They came up with a bunch of ideas, and then I got a phone call that said, hey, we want to bring you in as one of the writers. They basically said, all right, this is we have a general story arc. This is what we want to do for certain episodes, but we have some blank spots here. And so we all kind of went away, came back with a bunch of ideas. They created the whole story structure, but there's a lot of the smaller details. And then
kind of like the way a TV series functions.
Right. And then what they did was that they started assigning episodes to the different writers.
And things always change on set, too.
They changed a lot on set, yeah.
So as a writer, were you on set a lot when they were shooting principal photography?
Yes. Yeah, I was on set, and then anytime Brian had problems with dialogue, he would come up to me, and I would help him rewrite the dialogue to his to satisfaction.
For other filmmakers and people that are out there that are doing this in their basement or doing it in their backyard, to see that we didn't go that far out of the backyard to make this, and a lot of what makes 8 and 5 possible is a combination of the digital technology, but also Ben Brown's illustrations and the animation, and those are all hand-drawn pieces and things like that, and some of those hand-drawn textures got mapped onto three-dimensional models and other things to make that come alive. So with just the physical acting of it, standing on your feet in a concrete, green screen for 15 hours at a pop, it really is hardcore people just sitting down and practicing their craft and doing it well. But the digital technology helps to marry all that stuff and to put into a product that's hopefully entertaining to watch and inspiring to people to say, well, what can I do? Because this opens up a whole nother possibility of creating, any world you want on your desktop, on your computer.
Thanks for watching Framelines. If you'd like to know more about the show, check us out online at framelines.tv. Something I usually never get to say. That's a wrap. See you next time on Framelines.